Hey everyone, welcome back to Making the Game from Concept to Kickstarter. In this podcast, I, Reese, the lead game designer for the game Bloodthrone, discuss the process of going from tabletop gaming idea through the development cycle to crowdfunding, production, fulfillment, and more. In this episode 13, we're going to be talking about the Barbarian class in the game, and I'm doing this as a companion to the article that I wrote on the same topic to try and release them at the same time. And this is going to be my first attempt at doing this as a video cast in addition to a podcast. So please forgive me if it looks a little amateurish. I haven't edited a YouTube video in a really, really long time. So I'm going to have to kind of put the training wheels on this one and relearn how to do it. Hopefully you enjoy it. And if you have any feedback, of course, please let me know so that I can continue to improve. So first of all, the Barbarian class is meant to be the melee DPS king. Or in the case of the hero that comes in the core box, Kijo, the queen of melee DPS or damage per second. I'm sure the vast majority of you listening to this understand what that means, but it's just a term that means the class is designed to do lots of damage in melee. So you put this in contrast to the fighter, who was the first class that we covered in the in-depth series, and the fighter is primarily designed to be a tank. Their job is to stand on the front lines and take damage and not die, and also to draw aggro, as you would call it in a video game, or to force other models to attack them, because obviously if a model is designed to be attacked but not take much damage, any intelligent person or AI script for a monster is going to try and avoid that. So the fighter's job is to get you stuck on them and let the rest of their team do what they want to do. Barbarian's job is to go in and actually take enemy monsters, or in PvP, to take other heroes out in melee. That's what they're designed to do. So the Barbarian's primary skill tree is melee DPS or melee damage. The secondary skill tree is tankiness. So they're meant to be the second most durable class in the game, behind only the fighter. And as a tertiary skill tree, they have mobility. They only have one class skill in that, but the idea is the Barbarian doesn't want to necessarily get stuck. They want to have at least one tool in their toolbox to allow them to move around the tabletop freely so that they can attack what you want them to attack. So one of the things I forgot to mention in depth when we were discussing the fighter is equipment restrictions. Equipment restrictions are one of the key parts of class design to help them feel unique. When we first started making the game, we let anybody take anything, and then you ended up with parties where it's like everybody had a bow, or everybody was dual wielding warhammers, or whatever the playtesters thought was the most ideal equipment loadout. And the freedom was fun, but it got away from the core idea that this is a class-based, party-based game where every party member has a specific role. Like as opposed to a game like D&D where you're playing a single character, but you're playing with a group of people. Usually 4 is one of the more common sizes, 2 to 4. And you want every person to fill a role in the team so you don't have any shortcomings, right? Like you want a healer, you want a tank, you want a wizard, you want a rogue that can disarm traps, etc., etc. So the idea with Bloodthrone is that you get to do that, but you get to do it with one person controlling the whole party, right? So like playing a CRPG, some of my favorite games like Baldur's Gate or Pillars of Eternity or whatever, you get to kind of custom build a whole team as opposed to a single character. So with that kind of core design concept in mind, we decided to put equipment restrictions on to the classes to we didn't want to force people to do what we wanted them to do, but to at least kind of guide them into that. And we didn't want to be as restrictive as some games where, for example, Dragon's Dogma came to mind as a game I just played and enjoyed, where it's if you're a rogue, you can only ever wield dagger weapons, or if you're a barbarian, you can there's a very narrow selection of two-handed weapons that you can only ever take. And we didn't want to be that restrictive. We wanted to give people the freedom to be creative, because that's where the real fun is in dreaming up your own idea. Like, this is the way I want to build my barbarian. And we'll talk about that as we go through this. But we did want to avoid people purposely doing something with it that we didn't intend on that could be game breaking. We want people to do things we didn't think of, but we don't want people to do things we didn't think of that makes the game not fun. For example, we had people taking 2 shields, or dual wielding spears, which to be fair, on that second one, the dual wielding shields is just silly, right? From a game mechanic perspective, totally. But in real life, you're never going to see someone charging into battle with 2 shields unless there's just some bizarre circumstance where they didn't have any other choice. So, and then 2 spears, admittedly, I was like, that's just ridiculous. Like, that wouldn't happen outside of like a war boy in Mad Max Fury Road, you know, where they're jumping off the vehicle with 2 exploding spears, which was admittedly very cool. Anyway, not to go too far into it, we wanted restrictions that felt sensible, right? We wanted to do the least amount possible to have the class do what we wanted it to do. So it ends up being like a really big part of class design. So the fighter has to take a shield. That's basically their only restriction, and then they can't take a ranged weapon, right? So again, because we found in playtesting, if you had a team of all ranged characters and then you manipulated it so that their initiative was really high, so they went first, and you got like 6 long-range shots before the other person even got to activate it, it wasn't fun. Like, you'd end up assassinating 2 of their characters before they did anything. Smart from a, you know, optimization standpoint and from a you know, utilizing the game mechanics, but not really very fun, which should always be your number one guiding principle when you're making a game that's meant to be fun. So that was it for the fighter, and the fighter could take up to heavy armor. It's one of the only classes that can do that. It's the only class in their core box that can take heavy armor. The Barbarian has a similar amount of restrictions. They're very limited. Can't take any ranged weapons, and you can go up to medium armor, right? So the Barbarian cannot take heavy armor. They can go up to medium, and then they can't take any ranged weapon, but from there, you can do whatever you want. So when you're building the Barbarian, your own custom Barbarian, you're basically going to want to choose, do I want to go more tank oriented, or do I want to go more offense oriented? So Kijo, the Barbarian that's in the box, is built kind of in the middle. She has medium armor. She has a 2-handed great weapon, which are the most powerful 2-handed weapons, so she does a ton of damage in melee. But she took as her general, or her archetype feat, which I'll explain that a little bit further into the episode, the 2-hander, or the great weapon training feat. It used to be called 2-hander. The great weapon training feat gives her more damage, but it also lets her get 1 free parry with her great weapon. So once per activation, she can do a free parry action without having any penalties. So it lets her have some damage reduction. Medium armor is the second best armor in the game that you can get, and she hits like a truck. So when you're building your own custom Barbarian, you basically, that's where your head's going to be at. Like, do you want to go out all out offense, or do you want to mix in some defense or really lean into defense? So if you wanted to go more defensive oriented, you could take a 1-handed weapon and a shield. That would be and medium armor. That would be the most defensive oriented. Or you could do what I did in playtesting, which was a lot of fun. Took no armor, and then I had dual wielding axes with a dwarf, because I wanted to make him look like a dwarf slayer from Warhammer. For anybody who's familiar with that, they're really, really cool, fun characters. And I took all the different upgrades to get maximum HP. So even though I had no way of reducing damage, I had enough HP where you could just soak it in for a long time before getting knocked out. So at any rate, when you're building a Barbarian, that's pretty much where your head's going to be at. Do I want to go more well-rounded, more defensive oriented, or do I want to go maximum offense, dual wielding, or with a 2-handed weapon? Now, as I had mentioned earlier, when you're building a character from level 1, and as an aside, the heroes in the core box, they're all pre-built to level 1, right? So their general feat and their archetype feat, which you get 2 at level 1, which really help kind of shape the direction that you are going to have your character or your hero go in, those are pre-selected. So in the hero expansion, it gives you the rules for making your own custom heroes. When you do that, there's a lot of options, right? And so Kijo, as I explained, her archetype feat, meaning this is a feat that's available to her as a martial archetype character, is the great weapon training feat, which I already explained. Her general feat was tough, right, which gives her extra HP at level 1, and then extra HP at each odd level. Heroes gain extra HP at level 3, 5, 7, and 9. So she would get 1 extra HP at each one of those steps. So the tough general feat is very commonly chosen. It just gives you, it's a lot of bang for your buck. Over the course of the hero going from level 1 to level 10, which is max level, it gives you quite a bit of extra HP. It's 8, I believe, off the top of my head, 8 additional HP, which is a lot in Bloodthrone. But the reason I bring this up is that I wanted to take the time to explain that we built into the game ways to specialize your hero, especially like a martial hero, all of the specializations or all of the archetypes, martial, skill, and arcane, have these options available. But as it pertains specifically to martial characters, which they're the easiest to visualize, you have a choice of feats that lets you kind of really lean into whatever you want to do. So if you want to dual wield, you have to take the dual wielding feat. It unlocks the ability to make an attack action with both hands as one action. So it really increases the odds of hitting because you make 2 action rolls, and it increases your damage output significantly. Then there's the great weapon feat, which I just explained. It increases the damage and it increases your defense a little bit. But we also included like the duelist training feat. So, for example, if you wanted to build a character that only used one weapon in one hand, like a duelist with a musketeer type character with a rapier, or a samurai with a katana, from a rules perspective, a mechanics perspective, that would be a poor choice because every hero, excuse me, has a main hand and an offhand. And if you're not utilizing one of those slots from a rules perspective, it would be much less effective. But in real life, that was very common, right? That was a very normal way for a person that was engaged in sort of martial combat to behave. So then we built in a feat that gives you a lot of bonuses if you decide to forego using your offhand and you just want to make a character that looks cool or looks the way you want them to look. So we took a lot of time to build these sort of options into the game so that you never felt stupid for taking a hero that looks the way you want it to look and not feel like you're being punished from a rules perspective, right? And so to like kind of put a bow on that, the shield option, like for example, if you want to take a barbarian with an axe and a shield, obviously very iconic. The shield eats up one of your hand slots, which reduces your offense, but the shield allows you to use a block action. The block action is the best defensive action in the game. It roughly halves the damage that you take, and it works in melee, but it also works against ranged attacks, which includes spells that don't do raw damage bypass, armor, and any form of damage reduction. So it's you're losing that, you can't take a great weapon, a two-handed weapon, or an extra melee weapon, but you're getting the best defensive option in the game. It also statically increases your evasion. And your evasion, of course, is the stat that determines how hard you are to hit with physical attacks. It would be like armor class in D&D. So we spent a lot of time trying to make all these different, build types or speccing your character in video game parlance. Like you can come up with a build that's based on aesthetics, right? Like, I want to make a character that looks like Ragnar Lothbrok from the movie Vikings to be my barbarian, and you can do that. And the rules won't punish you. Now, I'm sure there's going to be people that think that X, Y, or Z, spec is optimal, is the quote-unquote best, but we wanted to do our best to make all the options feel viable. So we tested all these options. The Barbarian was actually one of the most popular classes in playtesting. My business partner beat my bottom with him quite a few times. There's just something about the Barbarian class that's very appealing, especially just the raw amount of damage they can do, which I'll explain as we go. And we tested all the options. We tried all like really goofy stuff too. We tried like goblin barbarians and all this sort of stuff, and it all worked. It really just comes down to the way you want the barbarian to play for you and your own custom party. And if you want them to be more tanky, or if you want them to just be all out, just smashing faces. Okay, so as we said, we're going to dive into the barbarian and look at all of their available options. So their primary skill tree is DPS. Now, in a previous episode, I discussed how we had every class has an archetype within which it fits. So there's the overarching archetype of, am I a martial character? Am I a skill-based character? Or am I an arcane character like a wizard? And within each of those archetypes, we have a sub-archetype that determines the role for that class within that overarching structure. So we did this because as we go forward and we start building faction specific, we come out with factions in the game. We wanted there to be parity between one faction and another. So the fighter is the tank archetype, and every faction will have their tank archetype. So the Dark Knight is the mirror to the fighter for the iconoclasts. Fighter is available to the adherents to Zenith faction, and the Dark Knight is available to the iconoclast faction. And as a quick reminder, those are sort of like broad factions. Those are like the two starting factions that are an amalgamation of basically all the other factions that are underneath those umbrellas. And I'll explain that more in depth, but I've covered it in previous podcasts. Suffice it to say, those are the two starter factions, and they're casting a wide net. You can kind of draw on the lore of any of the other factions to bring them into those umbrellas. At any rate, the fighter is the sort of the tank for the adherents to Zenith, and the Dark Knight is the tank for the iconoclasts. They both serve the same function of being there to absorb damage and to try and force people to attack them. They go about it in totally different ways. So the melee DPS archetype within those, the Barbarian is it for the iconoclasts, and the Paladin is that for the adherents to Zenith. The Barbarian accomplishes this role of being the melee DPS specialist with their class ability. The class ability, again, is what you always get it, right? It doesn't take up one of your skill selection choices. It's the definitive ability for the class. For the fighter, it's their untiring ability where they heal every turn. For the Barbarian, it's called Cleave. Obviously, if you've played any RPG, you're pretty familiar with this combo of Barbarian and Cleave. It's like the PB&J of fantasy gaming. We felt like it fit perfectly. Didn't see any reason to try and change it. Basically, what it is the Barbarian, if they're engaging two opposing models, two enemies, and they successfully hit one, they can make a free attack on the other, right? This is the core of what makes the Barbarian a DPS machine. So if you position the model correctly, you can get one free attack per activation, meaning you could potentially hit 3 models, or you could hit 2 models with one attack and then hit another one with the third, with your second action, or potentially hit 3 different models, right? So this obviously is a dramatic increase in potential damage output over any other character, and this is the core of what makes the Barbarian just a knockout machine. And as you can see at level 8, you can take a feat which upgrades this skill called Bloody Slaughterer, which lets you cleave another time per activation. So you could, if you can line it up, you could go into 2 models, hit them both, go into another 2 models, hit them both, and it makes the potential damage for the Barbarian just ludicrous. It's also really, really fun. It doesn't always come up. There's not always enemies clustered together like that, but when it does, it's devastating. The next class skill that the Barbarian has, and this is available at level 1, is called Take You With Me. This is a skill that you don't want to ever have to use, obviously, because it triggers when you're knocked out. Obviously you don't want your heroes getting knocked out, but it does happen. On average, we found that 2 heroes got knocked out per game in PvE, and PvP it was more. But basically, when a model knocks you out as a free reactive action, and again, reactive actions are the only thing you can do when your model's not active, when it's not their turn, and free actions don't take up any of your action economy. So it's a reactive action. When you're knocked out, you get to hit back. You have to hit the model that knocked you out if possible. If not, like if someone shot you from long range or whatever, you can hit anybody in range. So it's extremely useful. In PvE, it's really good because you can take one more monster down. In PvP, it's like more psychologically powerful because someone is like, oh gosh, if I bop the Barbarian, he's going to get one more shot on me, and it's really, really, really strong. Again, like when you have a limited amount of class skills, you may not always take it, but every time you take it, you're thankful you did. So that one's a really, really useful ability. Another level 1 class skill, and again, at level 1, you have a choice of 3 skills, and you always get your class ability. We did this because we wanted to front load the power of heroes at low level. I think it's silly when you have to wait to get, my character really comes into his own at level 12. It's like, most people never get that far when they're playing RPGs. So we wanted the heroes to feel really strong in the beginning, and then they get incrementally better as you go. And it also lowers the disparity between a low-level hero and a high-level hero because, in a PvP setting, if you have a level 2 character and the other person's level 8, you don't want it to be totally impossible for that. You want to have a puncher's chance to be able to win in that encounter. That's why we did it that way. So, Barbarian Battlecry is available at level 1. This is a shout action. Shout actions are almost always simple actions, meaning they take up your 0.5 action. As a quick recap, you have 2 standard actions and 1 simple action per activation. A simple action is something that's like, it's not quite a full action. It's sort of an in-between. In D&D, I think they call it your quick action, I think is what they call it. In 5e, I can't remember specifically, or a swift action is what they used to call it. But at any rate, a simple action is something that doesn't eat up into your meat and potatoes actions of like move, attack, cast a spell, etc. So shout actions are almost always simple actions. They function similarly to spells, but they're not. And in this instance, the Barbarian lets out a mighty war cry. Everyone that's engaging the Barbarian, everyone that's engaging the Barbarian is targeted. You roll, goes against will, and if it's successful, it gives them the Dazzled status effect. Dazzled is a really, really powerful negative status effect. We call it an affliction. Afflictions last for 1 turn, but it halves their evasion, right? It's really good because the Barbarian really, really wants to hit. They want to connect with their attacks because that's their main job, is to go in and just do damage. But it also makes it so anybody else attacking that model is going to have a better, higher chance of achieving it if it's a physical attack. Really powerful. If you take this class skill, you're going to pop it every turn because it's a simple action. And if you upgrade it with the one stands alone feat upgrade, it then also gives the Barbarian Panoptic, and models can't get the benefit of flanking on the Barbarian. So what that means, Panoptic gives you 360-degree line of sight when you are the active model, meaning when it's your turn. And this is huge because obviously with Cleave, if there's models behind you in your rear arc, which normally you wouldn't be able to target them because they're out of line of sight, now you can hit anyone that's in range of your weapon that is that you're engaging. So it makes Cleave much more effective. And then also just means you can just attack behind you. Like you can just rotate and face the model and attack them without burning an action. It's really good. And then models not being able to get the benefit of flanking or ganging up on you is really important. So when 2 models are attacking 1 enemy model, the 2 models attacking gain +1 advantage, right? So we built into the rules model positioning benefits that increase the odds of you doing what you want to do. So since the Barbarian is usually waiting right in there, hell bent for leather, they get ganged up on a lot. So this upgrade to that skill is really good. Obviously, if you're not using that skill, don't sweat it. But if you do, it makes it even better. At level 2, you get Barbaric Blow. This is like bread and butter. Pretty much always take this card in your deck when you're building your deck for your Barbarian. It's super simple. All it does is you declare, I'm going to use Barbaric Blow. And then if you hit with that attack, you add +2 power dice, which is big. It's a huge increase in damage, right? Your maximum power is 4. So, and Kidro starts with power 3. So it's like you're going from adding 3 damage dice to 5. You always take this, right? So the only downside to this, obviously, you can only use it once per activation. And it turns what would be a standard action into a special action. So it could be denied by any hero that has a denial ability, like an Inquisitor or the Warlord. So that's the only thing to think about when you're playing that in a PvP setting, or in PvE when you're playing against monsters that can deny abilities. These sort of like just extra damage cards, which we do. There's a lot of classes that have these. They're super fun to use because you're throwing like a handful of dice, and you usually just splatter whatever you attack. You have to just bear in mind that your opponent's going to be looking to try and block those. That's the only thing to bear in mind with those. Otherwise, Barbaric Blow is going to be in 90% of the Barbarian players' decks because it's just good. At level 6, you get access to Whirlwind of Death. Whirlwind of Death is an attack that you attack everyone you're engaging, right? So you just imagine the Barbarian like spinning in a circle, sort of like Diablo, just smashing everybody. It's great. You cannot use Cleave with it. It's the only restriction. It's an awesome ability. At level 8, you get Opportunistic Retaliation. This is a really, really powerful ability. And at first blush, when you're first reading it, you're like, what, this sounds kind of weird. It's basically when someone gets a free strike on you, an attack of opportunity. So if you leave engagement, or there's any number of things you can do. If you're trying to open an objective, you're trying to pick up an objective, anyone that's engaging you gets a free strike. So what this does is if someone free strikes you, you get to hit them back. So it's yet another attack that the Barbarian gets to do out of the normal attack sequence. The Barbarian has lots of reactive abilities, which are, again, those are things that you're doing that aren't burning one of your actions. It just increases their potential damage output more and more and more. So what this pairs extremely well with Reckless Charge, which is their mobility-based skill. Reckless Charge, which is also available at level 1, lets you declare a charge even if another model is engaging you. Right? Normally, if a model is engaging you, they're in base to base or they're 1 square away with a reach. You can't declare a charge, right? So that's a core part of the strategy of the game is like tagging. So like especially just like touching a barbarian in the rear arc, so he has to turn around, burn an action, and deal with you, or whatever. Or if you're stuck on a wimpy monster and you want to go attack like a more powerful monster, with Reckless Charge, you just declare the charge. You still get the attack of opportunity against you. Sometimes you either don't care because it's going to be barely do any damage to you, like if a wizard is on you and they're going to just bonk you with their staff and do like 2 damage. It's like, who cares? Just take it and go make the charge you want. Or it's worth the risk, right? Oh, it's like, I need to win the game. I need to get over to this other monster or opposing model. That's what Reckless Charge is for. When you get to level 8, on the way out the door, you can also hit the person that hits you, right? So it turns into this game of like, a monster is going to automatically attack of opportunity. They never don't. But in a PvP game, your opponent might be like, hey, you know what? Just go, dude. I'm not going to hit you because I don't want to take the massively powerful attack back from the Barbarian. At level 10, you unlock your ultimate ability. So as a reminder, your ultimate class ability, you just put it in your deck automatically. You don't have to use a skill card to take it. These are like their super abilities. If you were playing War Machine, for anyone's familiar with that game, this would be your feat. So theirs is called Berserker Fury. It's really, really strong. So this is played when the Barbarian would be knocked out. So instead, you are not knocked out. You become invulnerable for 1 turn, meaning you cannot go to 0 HP. And every action that you take while this status effect is in play gains +1 advantage, which just means it's more likely to occur. And then at the beginning of the following turn, once the effect wears off, right? So you get 1 full turn to use it. When you would activate thereafter, you die no matter what. You just get knocked out. Doesn't matter if you got healed back up to full health or whatever. So basically, it gives you 1 hyper-powered turn when you would have been knocked out. It's extremely good. Getting to level 10 is challenging. Not every hero in your party in a campaign will. It's usually only a few of them that do, unless you just absolutely play every scenario and max out every opportunity to get HP. The game has enough HP built into it, or I'm sorry, XP, to take everyone to 10. It's just in practice, it doesn't always work out. But if your Barbarian does get to 10, look out, because they are going to be absolutely brutal. And then again, if you're in combat when you get knocked out, you could also use Take Me With You. So you just have a ton of opportunity to do tons of damage. Really, really fun. For their secondary skill tree, which is tankiness or the ability to absorb damage, they have 1 class skill. It's called Defiance. It's a really, really cool skill. It comes at level 4, and once per game is a simple action. They can do a shout action, and they heal themselves their power characteristic in raw dice to heal. So it's basically like you could take this and a heal potion, because every hero can take 1 consumable. So it's basically like an extra heal potion that you get to do as a simple action. Really useful. Initially, we had it as something you could use every turn, but it burned a standard action to use it. And we found that people playing the Barbarian were like, they would take it because they would think they would use it. And they were like, I'd rather just attack, right? And so we switched it to once per game as a simple action. And they shout so hard they heal themselves. It's great. Really, really useful skill. And one that you'll find yourself choosing to take, especially if you do an HP sponge build on your Barbarian. Like Kijo is built not maximized in that way, but she's built in that direction. She has the most HP of any hero. It's really useful on Barbarians that are built like in that way, because they'll get to use it and it'll keep them in the fight for at least, usually buys them 1 more turn of action. Okay, so now we'll dive into the feats that are available to the Barbarian. As a quick reminder, every class has custom feats that are available only to their class at levels 2, 4, 6, and 8. And then there are general feats which are available to all classes that are available at 3, 5, 7, and 9. At level 5 and 9, though, just to add a little bit extra information, it's a stat boost point, right? So that's the only thing you can do, but it's awesome. You get to increase one of your stats. And then at level 3 and level 7 are the general skills that are available. They're universal. Every class has access to them. So for the Barbarian, much like the Fighter, has 2 branching options that are available, 2, 4, 6, and 8. And at every juncture, you can take only one, and it's a permanent choice. That applies to general skills as well. Each branch emphasizes either offense or defense, right? So as you're leveling up your Barbarian, you can choose to take a feat that's going to make you better at punching or better at taking a punch. And just as a reminder, feats are passive, whereas class skills are active. You use them with your card in the game. Feats are just always on. And they either increase some of your basic stats or they modify an existing skill. If they modify a skill, it will be on the class skill card, which you'll see here in this video format, which makes it a lot easier. So that you're not burning too much mental space trying to remember everything. At level 2, you can choose between 2 really good feats. The first one is called Hardened by Life, and that gives you plus 4 HP. What we found is because the Barbarian plays so aggro that they're taking a lot of damage. So we threw in the option just to get more HP, basically right away, right? At level 2, you hit that really quickly. And as an aside, I just wanted to explain, uses an example of one of the cool ways that you can customize your Barbarian or any hero for that matter I just want to use this as an illustrative example of how much freedom there is to spec out a really cool hero. So I mentioned earlier that I took like a Dwarf Slayer inspired Barbarian that didn't wear any armor, ran around in a loincloth with 2 axes, and I thought it was funny. We wanted in the rules for it also to be good. So what I did is I took a Mountain Dwarf Heritage. Heritage, we use that term, it's like race in RPGs. For Bloodthrone, because there's dwarves in every faction, we wanted to be more specific. So we used the term Heritage, which is a combination of race and ethnicity. So Mountain Dwarf they're really tough, right? So they start out with plus 2 HP, and their Heritage skill is Tenacious, which the first time they get knocked out, they don't get knocked out. They stay at 1 HP, and they gain the Stunned Affliction, which they lose 1 action. It's really, really good. And then at level 1, I took Tough, which is the general feat that Kidro also have. It's plus 3 HP at level 1, and then plus 1 HP at level 3, 5, 7, and 9, which is when heroes gain HP, as I said. So by default, you get 1 HP, right? So characters that don't care about having tons of HP, they're only going to get plus 1 HP at level 3, 5, 7, and 9, like the down in the rogue in the game is built that way. Tough gives you an additional plus 1, right? So you're getting 2 at level 3, 5, 7, and 9, but you also add in your Constitution characteristic. So I built my Dwarf Slayer Barbarian with 4 Constitution, which you get that at level 1, and then you get plus 4 HP at level 3, 5, 7, and 9. So as you can see, the amount of HP you get is wild, right? But since he didn't have any armor or any ability to defend himself, I wanted to be able to just not worry about defending myself and just take it. If you choose not to take any armor when you're building your own custom hero at level 1, there's the anti-armor choice, which is called Natural Vigor, which also gives you plus 4 HP. So we wanted you to be able to build like a Conan style Barbarian or any hero, because anybody can take Natural Vigor. So that if you wanted to go bare-chested for whatever reason, or you wanted someone that looked like they didn't have a lot of armor on, like a monk character, we wanted you to be able to do that in the rules, but then not feel stupid, like, oh, I just gave up any opportunity to have any sort of a benefit in my armor slot, which is only 1, right? In Bloodthrone, because you manage multiple heroes, we didn't want it to be overwhelming. Like, what left greave does my 3rd hero have? So you take Natural Vigor. Level 1 gives you plus 4 HP. Once you hit level 2, you take Hardened by Life, which is available only to the Barbarian, which gives you another plus 4 HP. And then at every level, you're getting plus 6 HP. So by the time you get to level 9, it's just ridiculous. You have 4x the HP of like a rogue character like Downin, who just was like, I'm going to focus on being hard to hit, and I'm not going to focus on being able to take a hit. So I explain all this only to show you the amount of options that you have, right? Like you could alternatively take a barbarian with medium armor, a shield, and a sword, and soak damage, like just ignore damage, through damage reduction and blocking, and not worry about maximizing your HP. Lots of options, right? I just want to be able to. I just want to kind of put the ideas in your mind of how many options you have when you can make your own custom hero. So that long aside, your other choice for a feat at level 2 is Bloodlust. Bloodlust is extremely good. So when a barbarian knocks out an opponent, either a monster in PvE or a opposing hero in PvP, they get a free move. They have to move towards the closest nearest enemy model. Anytime you get free movement in a game, in a miniatures game, it's massively good, right? So like, you can have a barbarian with Bloodlust that just feels like this relentless machine knocking things out, going forward. If you knock him out, he's going to knock you out. And that was exactly what we were going for when we built it. At level 4, you have the choice between Berserker and One Stands Alone. Berserker, it's really, really good. You're going to hear me say this a lot because I think we did a good job of making all the options feel good. Every time they take damage from an action, they gain the Berserk status effect. So what that means is someone has to act on you. It's not like having a DOT that's ticking every turn. They're just constantly triggering Berserk. It has to be an action that targets you. And when you have the Berserk status effect, you gain +1 power, +1 advantage, and you have to charge the nearest enemy model. So it's really powerful. But then when at the end of your turn, you take 2 red dice worth of damage, which could be up to 6 damage. It's very powerful. So it's, if you want like a balls to the wall style barbarian that's just like full blast going into it, which it feels very on brand for a barbarian, you can do that. And then One Standalone, we already explained, it modifies the Barbaric Battle Cry class skill. At level 6, you have 2 very simple but very, very powerful options. You can either increase your power statistic by +1, which is going to increase the damage that you do on every attack, or it can increase the amount you heal if you take the Defiant skill, or you can increase your damage reduction by +1. Really, both of those are extremely good, right? So if you took medium armor, like Kijo has medium armor, it would take her up to armor 3, which is where Ajax is, or you can just increase your offense even more. It just depends on what you want. They're both really, really good. Finally, at level 8, you can either increase cleave with Bloody Slaughter, which we've already explained, let you cleave second time, or you can take Resist the Witch. Resist the Witch is a passive +2 bonus to your will defense. So again, in the game, you have evasion, which is your kind of general defensive statistic, and then you have fortitude and will, which defend against special attacks. Fortitude is things that attack your body. Will is things that attack your mind or your spirit. And martial characters are usually have really low will, so they're very vulnerable to like mental attacks. This just passively gives you a benefit to that. So Bloody Slaughter seems like the obvious choice, I think, to most people. But what we found in playtesting is it doesn't come up more than maybe once or twice in a game where you get to cleave twice in one activation. It's pretty hard to do. When it does work, it can be game winning, right? Now, for somebody that doesn't want to worry about it or is sick of their barbarian getting mind controlled, just take +2 will. It's very, very useful. So now focusing on playing Kijo, the hero in the box game, in the core game specifically. Kijo is built with a mix of offense and defense in mind. She leans more towards offense. So she starts out with 24 HP, which is the most in the game. She's really beefy. She can take a punch. But her evasion is 1, which is the lowest. Like you can go to 0 evasion, but it's pretty rare. Like basically anyone that attacks her is going to hit her. Now again, because she has the Great Weapon Training General or Archetype feat at level 1, once per activation, she can parry with her Great Weapon. Normally when you parry, you gain the disarm status on the weapon that you parried with, meaning you can't attack with it in your next activation. Obviously that would be crippling for a character like Kijo. That's what she's there to do, is smash people with her Tetsubo. So she really is there, like her defensive strategy is parry that 1 attack per activation, the most powerful one that you want to reduce the damage roughly by half. And then basically you just take it on the rest of them. So you want to make sure to have the ability to heal her. Giving her a healing potion is always a good idea, or having a character nearby that can heal her. Obviously, Brother Boldstan, the priest, is the best option. Tatiana, the Dread Mage, can also heal pretty well, or Jibjob, the Alchemist. They're going to want to be somewhat near, because Kidra will get knocked out despite having medium armor, which takes 2 damage dice out of the damage pool every time that she's hit, and having 24 HP. The fact that she's just right in the middle of things, smacking people, means she gets attacked a lot, and then with Evasion 1, very rarely getting missed. So you just want to think about that when you're playing her. Now, on the upside, when you're looking at, one of the first things you'll notice when you see her hero board, which should be on the screen right now, if my video editing skills are up to par, which they should be, she has base damage 7, which is ludicrous. That's literally the highest you can get. So a great weapon is the most powerful melee weapon, starts out with base damage 6. Because of her great weapon training, she adds +1 to that. So she's throwing 7 dice base. Plus she has power 3. Excuse me. So when she's attacking, she's throwing 10 dice, which is insane. And the fact that her Tetsubo also has the armor piercing keyword, every weapon has at least one keyword. Ajax's sword has the accurate keyword, which means swirls on the action dice automatically count as explosions. So it increases his odds of hitting by a significant amount. The armor piercing keyword automatically activates black explosions on any action dice as critical hits, meaning you replace a white die with a red die. Again, the red dice are raw dice, ignore armor, can't be blocked. So it increases her damage output even more, and it helps her to overcome high armor enemies. So she's just built to smash things. She also has a really good accuracy at 4, which is very high. So she's not going to miss very often. And if you combo that with the Barbaric Battle Cry class skill, and she's having the evasion of her target or the targets near her, that really dramatically increases not only her accuracy, but it gets you more mileage out of the armor piercing special rule. So to recap really quickly, when you are throwing more offensive modifier dice at your opponent than they have defensive modifier dice, it increases the amount of critical hits that you can get. So for her, anything that can increase her accuracy and lower her target's evasion means that she's going to hit more and do more damage, right? So it's like a compounding effect, right? So though that combo is kind of a bread and butter combo for her. And then once you get to level 2 and you can take Barbaric Blow on top of it and you're throwing 12 dice, you're just obliterating things. She's really, 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 really fun to play. Like, she genuinely one of the most popular heroes to play, and often she felt like she was the man of the match, or woman of the match in this case. When she gets on a tear and she's just walking through monsters, just smashing them, it's really, really satisfying because you're just throwing so much dice at things and just exploding them. Again, the only thing you have to bear in mind is to keep your eye on her HP, because she will go down. And then as an aside, I threw in a designer's note in the article, and this bears some explanation because it helps to shed some light on different ways to build your heroes. The great weapon, two-handed weapons, compete with dual wielding for DPS. You can also do the one-hander build. I'll explain that later because I don't want to go too far into the weeds. But in playtesting, we wanted there, again, as I said in the beginning of the show, we wanted there to be parity between the options, right? We don't want it to be like, oh, you always go dual wield or you always go two-handed. They both have their ups and downs, and I'll kind of briefly go through those. So dual wielding gives you 2 attacks for 1 attack. Like, you get 2 action rolls for 1 action. That's the main benefit. So if one of the, like, for example, if you're dual wielding axes with a Barbarian and you roll for both, one misses, well, the other one could hit. So it increases your odds of hitting dramatically. Now, your damage output will go down if one misses and one hits, but you're much more likely to hit. You only ever add power once. It's treated as 1 action, but you get 2 rolls. The other benefit to dual wielding is that if you're being attacked, you can parry with one of the weapons and still get to attack with the other one. So it's very versatile, right? So we needed the two-handed option, the great weapon option, to compete with that. So what the great weapon option does, for one, it gives you reach range. And usually when you're dual wielding, usually you're not going to have reach range. It's going to be melee range, meaning it's every square you're touching. Reach range gives you 4 extra squares that you threaten. So it increases the amount of squares you can affect quite a bit. So that's a benefit because you can tag someone from outside of the range, they can tag you back in engagement. But the main benefit of a two-handed weapon over dual wielding is that when you're going against somebody that has armor, the damage reduction from armor is applied to every successful action roll, right? So for example, if you were dual wielding and you hit somebody with armor 2, and you hit with both of your actions, you would take away 4 dice total, 2 from each successful action roll. But with a great weapon, since you're only rolling once, you would only take away 2 dice from your damage dice pool, right? So using Kijo as a specific example, she's throwing 10 dice because she's almost maxed out on what she can do on offense. If she goes against somebody that has armor 2, it's going to go down to 8 from 10. So the great weapon is really good for overcoming armor. Now, for example, if Kijo was using 2 battle axes, which are damage 4 each, she would start with 11 total dice because it's 4 and 4 plus her power of 3. But the armor would be applied twice. She would go down to 7, right? Now, if it was armor 3, then and as you go up, the difference gets exacerbated. So instead of taking away 3 dice from the damage dice pool from going from 10 to 7, you're taking away 6. You go from 11 down to 5. And then that problem is exacerbated the more the armor goes up. So we did that intentionally. We wanted the two-handed weapons to feel like these are the armor-defeating weapons. So if you're going up against an opponent that has damage reduction 3, which is the highest you can get at a base level, and it can get modified up to 4 or even 5 with special abilities in game buffs and such. A lot of normal mundane physical attacks are just going to bounce off of it. Kijo, on the other hand, can go in there and smack them. So we built it that way so that she can go into the mini boss and boss monsters and really still throw a lot of dice at them. And also to finish my point, I'm sorry, I divulged there a little bit, or I diverted, is to make the choice between dual wielding and great weapon a real choice, right? So like I said, Kijo can go into boss monsters or high armor monsters and still overcome their defenses, which feels really satisfying. Or she can go into tons of little wimpy monsters and bop multiple of them at a time. So again, pretty straightforward how to play her. Get her stuck in and just start smashing things and then just try to keep her in the game as long as you can. She does get knocked out quite a bit, honestly. When you're leveling her up, really just choose the feats that appeal to you, right? Like in playtesting, at first, we had players who were always taking the offensive abilities, but because she takes a lot of damage on our second time playing through the campaign, they ended up taking a lot of the defensive buffs because they felt like her offense was good enough, and then they wanted to just increase her defense so that she could stay in the fight. It's really just, it's up to you. But that's what you want to keep in mind when you're playing Kijo specifically. Some of the support abilities, options that are going to be really good, like I mentioned, the Priest and the Alchemist, they both have heal over time abilities. The Priest has the best healing abilities in the game, period. But throwing heal over time on the Barbarian is really useful because she can tend to get away from everybody else. So throwing things on her that are going to keep her healing, even every time she activates, helps to get like 1 more, 2 more turns out of her. Another really, really useful ability, or magical item that you can find in the game is the Trollhide Belt, and that heals you 2 red dice every time you activate. It's a really powerful ability. So if you have that and a heal over time spell on her, maybe you found something else that can increase her HP, it makes it so that she is self-sufficient and that she just keeps healing every time. As long as she survives, she's going to get more HP and then just keep going. So anything like that you can find is going to really help you get more turns out of the Barbarian and thus more dead monsters or enemy heroes. Anything that lowers her accuracy is going to be really brutal. The Blind Affliction is the most prominent of those. Blind lowers your accuracy to 0, so it's brutal. It means you're throwing no offensive modifier dice when you're attacking a monster or an opposing hero. That's when you really, really want to avoid. Martial characters in general are really vulnerable to crowd control abilities, things that target their will, paralyzed, fear, terror. These abilities are really punishing for martial characters. You want to try and protect them from that. The best way to do that is with any kind of a game-long buff that boosts their will, or by using someone like the Inquisitor who can stop a special action from a monster or an opposing hero. Also, as Kijo is Onikin, that's her heritage. She has a once per game ability It's called the Oni's Kiss, which is just a headbutt, and it does raw damage. It's a free attack. So super fun. But basically, if you're in a situation where you like didn't quite kill a monster and they've got like 2 or 3 HP left, pop that and just smash them with the headbutt. It's fun. It's really fun just to use it. It can be a lifesaver too. Like it can finish off a monster or, you know, just do that last little bit of HP that you need. Keijo has a pretty modest class skill options of 2. She only has intelligence 1, but Ajax has intelligence 0, which again, having a attribute score of 0 in Bloodthorn isn't bad. It just means you're average. It means you're like a normal person. Anything above that is like being special, right? So intelligence 1 is like being smarter than the average bear. Ajax is intelligence 0. However, he took a general feat at level 1 called extended training, gives you +2 class skills. Keijo took tough as a general skill instead, which gives her a lot more HP. However, the trade-off is that she then invests 1 of her skill points into intelligence so that she gets at least 2 class skills. So she has a bit of a limited selection at first. However, as you go, you get options to get more class skills. For example, at level 3 and level 7, every class has the ability to take a general feat called Journeyman Training, and at level 7, you have another option. And that gives you an extra class skill. I take that all the time. There's also magical items that can give you more class skills, etc. So you can increase that number. At level 5, you could take a boost point to intelligence, for example, for a hero and give him an extra skill. Intelligence has other uses as well, but that's the most prominent one for what we're talking about now. So there's ways to get more class skills, but Keijo is always going to have a more limited amount of class skill options than other heroes that we'll talk about as we go. So as I said, Keijo is definitely one of the most fun heroes to play. Whenever we were playtesting, she was always one of the first heroes to get chosen, right? Like Ajax was always the first because the tank, he's fun, he hits hard, he's super easy to play, he doesn't get knocked out very much. He was usually the most popular selection. Keijo was like right up there. It's usually with a player who's a little bit more comfortable with the game. Would be like, heck yeah. The Barbarian and the Rogue were always really, really popular because they're so fun to play. And she often felt like she would win the match for you because she would just do so much damage. In PvP, again, the thing you want to be wary of with her is she's really, really vulnerable to mental attacks, and she's really easy to hit. So another version of Keijo, like a hero that's built for DPS, can really do a number on her because her evasion is so low. So you want to be wary of that. Well, that'll do it for the Barbarian. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know if there was any other information you would like. Did you think the episode was too short, too long? Any feedback would be really appreciated. If there's any hero you would like me to cover next or class, please let me know. And you can still back the project over on GameFound. Just look up Bloodthorn: The Tower of Sacrifice. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you all next week.